Okay, I want to take a look at a little method that's commonly used to test outputs, and what you would use for your HMI is you would, on your HMI, you would put like a little bypass rung right here that if you wanted to see if an output was working, you could go to a screen on your HMI and you could just kind of touch this button to see if that output was working or not. It's a good way to test outputs. Now, this works great typically with something like a solenoid. So, you could come up to your HMI and push the button and this would come true and bypass, and then your cylinder would extend or not extend. Or if you were really troubleshooting, you could certainly kill the air pressure in your cylinder and go to your HMI and test this and just see if how this was working. This might also work, with a VFD. You could turn on a conveyor by pushing your HMI button and getting this to bypass and getting to move into the variable frequency drive, stuff like that. But what you got to be careful with is if you're bypassing memory. So let's say this, my mapped output right here. Let's say this was like a motor starter or something like that, and it had a memory circuit here, and whether this was just a bit holding it on or whether these were auxiliary contacts holding this on. Um, the auxiliary contacts would be mapped as an input, so it would all be part of the ladder scan. So what's happening here? Well, I've got a stop button normally closed, and then I've got a start button. So here's my stop start memory circuit. Let's ignore this HMI input for now. So if I went ahead and I push my start button right here, I'm holding down my start button, and I would have my motor starter come on, for example. When I let go, the motor starter stays on, and I've got memory. That makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit my stop button and bring it down. Okay, now you would think, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just I want to see this motor starter is working or not. And so I would come to my HMI and I would hit this button right here. I'm holding it down on my HMI input, and basically it bypasses all this, and it would turn on the motor starter to see if see if the motor was running, whatever that was running. And it looks like it's got memory here, but this memory, you can tell, hey, it doesn't look like it's going to hold because I'm holding down this HMI input, which is opening this rung right here. So when I let go of the HMI input, well then, maybe that would just stop right away. But I'm going to go ahead and let go of the HMI input, and you'll notice that this stays on. So what is happening here? Well, this is part of the scan where once we've got all these inputs out of the IO scan, and we've got it mapped so it's into the ladder scan, it's basically going to be similar to an older generation where it checks the inputs, solves the logic, updates the outputs. And so what it did was this was true because it was closed, and I was holding this button down, which was my bypass right here, which was making my output true. And then on the next scan, what it does is it says, hey, this was a 0 before, but somebody turned this on, so because it's a contact, I'm going to make it a 1. So I've got true, true, and then this was false a minute ago when I was holding that button right there. That was false. All right, so it wasn't going to be working. So now when I let go of the button, what it does is it starts the next scan, and it says, well, I had a 1 here because it was wired closed. I had a 1 here because this output was on, and I'm going to start scanning the inputs. Well, it scans this input right here is 0, so it returns it back to here. And then what it does is it updates the outputs, okay? But notice at the start of the scan, this had a 1 in it. So it actually has to solve the ladder scan, turn this off, and make it a 0 on the next scan or at the end of that scan. And it doesn't work in order because this gets made true before this gets solved as false, which would make that false. And so because this number comes false, this stays true. So the bypass, which is it's a very cool thing to make a HMI screen. If you don't want the operators to do it, you could password protect it or something like that, where you could just go in and pull up a screen, and you can put a little bypass in here to check your outputs to see if they're working. But once again, if you're bypassing some type of a memory, you got to be aware of the way that the ladder scan is working.